The mysterious arrival of the monster. It was a calm and quiet morning when the first strange event occurred. The sky above the city was clear, but something unusual was happening. It started with a low rumble, almost like thunder, but it wasn't, quite like anything anyone had ever heard before. People stopped what they were doing and looked up, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. The sound was deep, almost unnatural, vibrating through the air. Then the lights flickered. It was just for a second, but it was enough to cause panic. Computers in offices turned off. Cars on the streets stopped working, and even the phone signals began to drop. The world seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Across the globe, people were experiencing the same thing. No matter where they were, whether in bustling cities or small villages, the power went out, and the strange rumble echoed in their ears. Something was happening, something big, but no one knew what. Suddenly, a bright flash of light cut through the sky. It was so bright, it seemed to light up the entire world. The light came from the sky itself, from a point far above the clouds beyond where even airplanes could fly. It didn't look like anything natural, and no one could explain it. Some people thought it was a meteor. Others believed it was a satellite crashing down, but it was neither. The light grew larger and larger until it finally seemed to take shape. What appeared in the sky was not a falling star or an ordinary object. No, this was something far more dangerous. It was something that no one on Earth had ever seen before. The object was massive, huge enough to cover half the sky. At first it looked like a glowing ball of fire, but then it began to change, revealing sharp angles and mechanical structures. It wasn't just a glowing ball, it was something alive, something alien. It was as if the sky itself was being torn apart by the force of this thing's arrival. People screamed in terror, some running to shelters, others staring in disbelief. But no one could look away, and then came the sound, a terrible bone-shaking noise that sent chills down everyone's spine. It wasn't just the sound of something crashing or exploding, it was a scream, an inhuman alien scream that echoed through the air. It was so loud that it rattled windows and shook buildings. People fell to their knees, their ears ringing, from the intensity of it. At that moment, the world knew that something terrible had come to Earth. The alien object began to descend slowly, hovering over the surface of the planet. It was so large that it blocked out the sun, casting an eerie darkness over everything. There was a heavy silence, as if the Earth itself was holding its breath. No one dared to move. No one knew what to do. All eyes were fixed on the thing in the sky. Then, with a deep, unnatural growl, the alien craft began to move. It wasn't like anything humans had ever seen before. It didn't have wings or engines. It simply floated, defying the laws of gravity. It hovered above the city, and as it did, the ground below began to crack. Buildings shook, streets buckled, and the air filled with a strange, sharp energy that seemed to affect everything it touched. The military, the scientists, the government, they all scrambled to respond. But no one had any answers. No one knew what this was or how to fight it. The craft had come from deep space beyond the stars, and it was clear that nothing on Earth could stand against it. The government issued warnings, telling people to stay indoors, to avoid the area near the object. But it didn't matter. People gathered outside, staring up in awe and fear. News channels were flooded with reports, but even the experts were speechless. The alien craft seemed to be studying Earth, observing the world below it. It did not make a move, at least not yet, but the tension was unbearable. Everyone knew that this was only the beginning. A few hours later, strange signals began to flood the airwaves. Unexplained signals, unlike anything anyone had ever seen or heard. The strange sounds mixed with radio waves and distorted TV broadcasts. The message was clear, but impossible to understand. It was alien, foreign, and completely incomprehensible. But then came another message, one that was more direct. It was a warning, a single sentence decoded from the strange symbols and noises. The monster is coming. For a moment the world was still. Then panic set in. The military rushed to action, but they were not prepared for what came next. The monster, this creature, this being, was not just a ship, it was alive, and it had come to Earth, bringing with it a terror no one could imagine. The ground beneath everyone's feet trembled and the sky darkened even further. The air seemed thick with electricity. The monster was here. As the craft hovered just above the city, the people watched in horror as a huge, shadowy form began to take shape in the darkened sky. It was enormous, moving with a terrifying grace. It looked like something that had been made from nightmares, an enormous creature with twisted limbs, glowing eyes, and a mouth that seemed to scream with the weight of 1,000 years of hunger. The first scream was the worst. The monster's roar shook the very air, filling every ear with a sound that could break the spirit of anyone who heard it. It was not just a sound, it was a force of nature. The world seemed to pause in that moment. The fear was overwhelming, but no one could run. There was nowhere to hide. The monster was here, and humanity was about to face the unimaginable. The countdown had begun. The hero emerges as the monster's shadow stretched across the earth. Darkness fell over every city, every town. There was no escape from the terrifying presence in the sky. Fear gripped the hearts of humanity. Governments scrambled to respond. Military forces mobilized, and every news outlet broadcasted the same message. The monster is here, and there's nothing we can do. But amidst the chaos, in the midst of the world's greatest fear, there was one person who refused to give up. In a small, cluttered office at a top-secret research facility, Dr. Adrian Quinn stared at the screens in front of him. The world was falling apart, but he wasn't afraid. His mind, however, was racing. Adrian wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was a scientist, a researcher specializing in alien technologies and ancient extraterrestrial history. And although the rest of the world was scrambling for answers, Adrian knew something others did not. He knew that the monster, the creature from the stars, wasn't an invader. It was something much worse. He had been studying strange artifacts for years, alien relics that had been discovered in deep space and across ancient ruins on Earth. The more he learned, the more he realized that there were forces far older than humanity itself, forces that even the greatest minds couldn't comprehend. And this monster, this terror that had descended upon Earth, was part of that ancient evil. Adrian's mind raced as he pored over the data, searching for a way to stop the creature. The military had their plans, but they were futile. All their weapons, all their technologies were useless against an enemy that wasn't just from another planet, but from another time. Adrian knew the creature's power wasn't based on brute force. It was based on something far more dangerous. It fed on fear, on chaos, and it thrived in the confusion it created. He needed to act fast. A cold sweat formed on his brow as the clock ticked away. The world had only hours, maybe minutes, before the monster would destroy everything. But Adrian was certain of one thing: he couldn't do it alone. He picked up the phone and dialed a number, one that he hadn't called in years. The voice on the other end was calm, controlled, but there was an unmistakable urgency in the way they spoke. "It's happening, Adrian. The creature is real. We're losing control." "I know," Adrian replied, his voice steady. "And I have a plan, but I need your help. We can't fight this thing the way they want us to. We have to think outside the box. We need to understand it. We need to speak to it." The voice paused. "You're not suggesting—" "I am. I know how to do it, but I need access to the ancient ruins, the ones that were hidden deep underground. We need to find the answers there." There was silence on the other end, but only for a moment. Then, the voice spoke again, this time with determination. "I'll make the arrangements. You'll have what you need. But this— Adrian, this is madness. You're talking about risking everything." "I know," Adrian said, looking out of the window at the chaos unfolding outside. "But if we don't, there will be nothing left to risk." With that, he hung up the phone and began to prepare. The time for theory was over. The world needed action, and Adrian was going to take the biggest risk of his life. Hours later, Adrian stood at the entrance of a massive underground facility. the air thick with the weight of history and mystery. The place had been forgotten for centuries, hidden beneath layers of earth and rock. Only a few knew of its existence, and even fewer knew what lay within. The ancient ruins were older than any civilization on Earth. They were carved with symbols that no one understood, relics of a time long before humanity had walked the planet. Adrian had studied these ruins for years, and now he was about to uncover their greatest secret. But there was a problem. As he descended deeper into the facility, a strange feeling washed over him. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew cold. Every step echoed in the silence, and with each passing moment Adrian felt like he was being watched. The creature, the monster, was drawing nearer, and the closer he got to the ruins, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing with a dark energy. Adrian wasn't just looking for answers anymore. He was searching for a weapon that could stop the creature. He had no illusions. What he was about to do could cost him everything, but he had no choice. As he entered the heart of the ruins, a massive chamber stretched out before him. In the center, an ancient stone pedestal stood, glowing faintly with an eerie light. On it, a strange crystal pulsated with energy. It was the key. He could feel it in his bones. But as he stepped forward to examine it, something shifted in the shadows. A low growl echoed through the chamber, and the temperature dropped even further. Adrian's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The monster wasn't just in the sky, it was here, in the ruins too, and it was hunting him. A figure emerged from the darkness, its shape twisted and distorted. It wasn't the creature from the sky, but something far worse. An ancient guardian, a being created to protect the crystal, appeared in front of Adrian. Its eyes glowed with a fierce, otherworldly light, and it let out a scream that shook the very ground beneath him. Adrian's mind raced. He had no time to waste. The guardian was closing in, but the crystal was just within his reach. He could sense its power, its connection to the monster above. He needed to act quickly, or everything was lost. With a burst of courage, Adrian lunged for the crystal, just as the guardian struck. The air crackled with energy as Adrian gripped the crystal, feeling its power surge through him. The guardian screamed, but it was too late. Adrian had the weapon. He could feel the pulse of the crystal as the monster above reacted, its roar filling the air, louder and more furious than ever before. Adrian knew it wasn't just a tool, it was a link. The crystal connected him to the creature, and for the first time he could hear its thoughts. It was trying to stop him. It knew what he had found. But Adrian wasn't about to back down. The battle for humanity had only just begun. Secrets of the monster unveiled. The air in the underground chamber seemed to throb with an unnatural energy, a pulse that matched the rhythm of Adrian's racing heart. He had narrowly escaped the guardian's attack, clutching the ancient crystal tightly in his hand. As he held it, he could feel its power, raw and untamed, coursing through his fingers like a living thing. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to something far bigger and far darker than he had anticipated. Adrian stepped back, breathing heavily, his mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded. The crystal glowed with a soft, eerie light, and as he stared at it, he could hear something. Whispers, faint but unmistakable. The crystal was communicating with him, but it wasn't just speaking in a language he could understand. No, this was something far more complex, something ancient. It was as if the crystal had been waiting for him, calling to him for centuries. He closed his eyes, focusing on the energy it was radiating, trying to make sense of the message. The whispers grew louder, clearer, and then they stopped, replaced by a single word: awaken. It was then that he realized the truth. The monster, the creature that had descended from the heavens, wasn't just some random being from another planet. It wasn't even an alien at all. It was something older, something far more terrifying. The creature was a part of Earth's own forgotten history, a force that had been buried deep beneath the surface for millennia. It had once been human, a long-forgotten ancestor, altered by forces far beyond their understanding. The crystal in his hand was a relic of that ancient time, a time when civilizations had risen and fallen long before humanity had even begun to walk the earth. The creature above, the one causing all the destruction, was the last of its kind, a being twisted by alien technology, now driven by an insatiable hunger for power and control. Adrian's mind was spinning. He had spent his entire life studying alien cultures, but this was something he had never even imagined. He had always believed that humanity was alone in the universe, that the threats they faced were from outside their world. But this was different. This monster was a part of them, a part of Earth. And it had been waiting, dormant, until the moment was right. Adrian turned back to the pedestal where the crystal had once rested, his fingers trembling as he placed it back. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to find, perhaps more answers, perhaps a way to stop the creature once and for all. But as the crystal settled into its place, the chamber around him seemed to shift. The air grew thicker, the walls trembled as if responding to the crystal's presence. Then, without warning, the ground beneath his feet cracked open and a deep guttural rumble echoed through the chamber. The whispers returned, louder this time, filling his mind with 1,000 voices, all speaking at once. The creature above, the one in the sky, was speaking to him through the crystal. It was trying to communicate, to make him understand. "You are not ready," the voice rumbled in his mind. "You cannot stop what has been set in motion." The words were like ice in his veins. Adrian stumbled backward, clutching his head as the voices grew louder, more intense. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt as if he were being pulled into the very heart of the creature, into its consciousness. He could feel its ancient hatred, its centuries of pain, its hunger. And he realized, with a chill running through him, that the creature wasn't just after Earth. It was after something deeper, something more precious than anything he could comprehend. The crystal began to pulse with an intense light, and in that moment, Adrian understood. The monster wasn't just seeking destruction. It was trying to reclaim what had been taken from it long ago. The crystal wasn't just a weapon. It was a part of its soul, a fragment of its essence, and the only thing that could stop it from unleashing its full power upon the world. He had to act. But how? What could one man, even with this crystal, possibly do to stop such an overwhelming force? As the chamber around him began to shake, Adrian knew time was running out. He could feel the monster's presence drawing closer, its rage building with every passing second. He had to leave, but he couldn't leave empty-handed. There had to be more to the ruins, more answers hidden deep within their ancient walls. And so, with one last glance at the pedestal, he turned and sprinted toward the far end of the chamber. Hours later, Adrian emerged from the ruins, breathless and covered in dirt. He had uncovered more than he had expected. Beneath the ruins, hidden in the deepest chamber, he had discovered a series of ancient texts, written in a language he could barely comprehend. But even through the thick veil of their cryptic symbols, one thing was clear. The creature in the sky wasn't just a remnant of Earth's forgotten past. It was a force created by the very planet itself, a product of an ancient war that had nearly wiped out all life on Earth long before humanity had ever existed. As Adrian sifted through the ancient scrolls, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The monster, the being that had once been human, was a result of a long-lost experiment, a failed attempt to merge humans with alien technology. These experiments had been carried out by a secret civilization, one that had vanished without a trace. The experiments had gone horribly wrong, and the creature was the result of that catastrophic failure. It had been left to roam the Earth, its mind twisted and corrupted by the dark forces it had been exposed to. But the true horror was yet to come. According to the texts, the monster was not merely a physical being. It was part of something much larger, a massive cosmic entity that had been summoned to Earth through the ancient rituals of a forgotten cult. It wasn't just Earth that the creature sought to destroy. It was the entire galaxy, and perhaps even the universe itself. And the crystal in Adrian's hand was the key to either its destruction or its ultimate ascension to power. The implications were staggering. The fate of not just Earth, but every living thing in the galaxy rested on Adrian's shoulders. And yet he felt small, insignificant in the face of such a massive, overwhelming force. How could one man, even with the crystal, possibly stop something this powerful? But then, as the wind howled around him, he remembered something that had been said earlier. The monster had spoken to him. It had tried to warn him, to make him understand that he was not ready. But Adrian had no choice now. The time for waiting was over. The world was already at the brink, and if he didn't act soon, it would be too late. With a renewed sense of purpose, Adrian clutched the crystal tightly, feeling its power surge through him. He wasn't alone in this fight. And he wasn't going to let Earth fall to the darkness. It was time to awaken humanity's last hope. The battle was about to begin. Humanity's desperate struggle. The world was spiraling into chaos. Days had passed since the creature's arrival, and no one knew how much longer humanity could survive. Cities lay in ruins. Desperation had gripped every nation as the monster's presence grew stronger with each passing moment. Governments collapsed, their leaders failing to contain the widespread panic. The once great military powers of the world stood helpless, in the face of a force they could not understand, let alone defeat. In every corner of the globe there were signs of the monster's influence. The sky had turned a sickly shade of red, and strange storms raged uncontrollably. The oceans churned, and even the earth itself seemed to tremble in fear. But the most terrifying sign of all was the monster in the sky. It had become more than just a looming threat. It was now a part of the very fabric of existence. Its presence bent reality, twisted the laws of nature, and filled the air with a constant, oppressive tension. As the days passed, the survivors began to lose hope. The military launched attack after attack, but their weapons were useless against the monster's impenetrable force field. Every missile, every bomb, every attempt to fight back only served to make the creature angrier. It responded with thunderous roars that could be heard from miles away, and every time it screamed, cities crumbled further. The monster was feeding off the chaos, growing stronger with each act of violence, each moment of fear. In the midst of this global nightmare, Quinn found himself standing at the head of a small group of survivors. His journey had brought him to this point, the discovery of the ancient crystal, the unveiling of the creature's horrifying true nature, and the realization that humanity was facing not just an alien invader, but an ancient, unstoppable force. The crystal had given him a glimpse of the truth, but it had also made him acutely aware of the overwhelming power the creature wielded. The knowledge he held was both a blessing and a curse. He knew what needed to be done, but he was unsure if he or anyone could survive the coming battle. The survivors had gathered in a secret underground facility, one of the few places left, untouched by the creature's wrath. It was a small resistance group, scientists, soldiers, and civilians who had managed to escape the destruction. Adrian's presence was their only hope. They had no other plan, no other way to fight back. And yet, even as they waited for his guidance, the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. Could one man truly be the difference between survival and extinction? Adrian paced in the dimly lit room, trying to focus, trying to come up with a plan. But the truth was, there was no easy solution. The monster above was unlike anything humanity had ever faced, and time was running out. He couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was already preparing for the final strike, that its next move would be the one to end everything. One of the soldiers, a grizzled veteran named Captain Rourke, broke the silence. His voice was steady, but the fear in his eyes was impossible to ignore. "Dr. Quinn, we're out of options. The creature's closing in on every major city. If we don't act now, we'll be wiped out completely. We need your plan. Whatever you found in those ruins, whatever you uncovered, we need it now." Adrian turned to face him, his gaze cold and focused. "The creature is no ordinary alien. It's not here to conquer Earth, it's here to reclaim it. The crystal I found, it's not just a weapon, it's a link, a conduit to its power. If we can use it, we might have a chance. But we need to get to the heart of the creature's control, to its very core. That's where the key to stopping it lies." Captain Rourke nodded grimly. Then what are we waiting for? We need to move now. Adrian hesitated. He knew that what he was proposing was dangerous. It wasn't just about attacking the creature. It was about infiltrating its very being, its essence. To get close enough to confront it, they would have to breach its defenses, which were unlike anything the world had ever seen. Every instinct told him that they wouldn't make it. Yet there was no other choice. We'll need to move fast, Adrian said, his voice low but filled with determination. I've discovered where the creature's power is concentrated. There's a hidden nexus somewhere beneath the Earth's surface. That's where the crystal's power comes from, and that's where we need to go. The room fell silent as everyone processed the information. The creature's power is coming from beneath the Earth? Asked Dr. Isabel, a scientist who had been working with Adrian since the beginning. You mean to say that the monster is the power source? Adrian nodded slowly. Exactly. The creature isn't just an alien force. It's the last remnant of an ancient, forgotten civilization. Its very essence is tied to Earth's core. And if we can reach it, if we can destroy the nexus, we can sever its connection to this world and destroy it for good. But how do we even get close to something like that? Captain Rourke asked, his voice thick with skepticism. Adrian didn't answer right away. He knew that the odds were slim. But he had already come so far, and he couldn't turn back now. The resistance group would be their only chance to succeed. The creature was coming. If they didn't strike first, there would be nothing left to save. I've developed a plan, Adrian said, his voice now filled with the cold determination that had carried him through every challenge so far. But it's going to require all of you. We'll need to reach the central core of the creature's power, its nexus. To do that, we'll have to navigate through a series of ancient tunnels and structures buried deep within the Earth. The creature has been using these tunnels for centuries, but we can use them to get close. The room seemed to hold its breath. There were no guarantees, no assurances of safety. But there was one thing they all knew. It was either this or nothing. The next few hours were a blur. Adrian and the resistance prepared for the dangerous journey ahead. The tension was palpable, each person knowing that they might not return. But the world needed them, and they were willing to risk everything to save it. Adrian's thoughts were focused on one thing: the crystal. Its power was immense, but it was also unpredictable. It was the key to stopping the creature, but if they didn't use it properly, it could very well destroy them all. The closer they got to the creature's core, the more the crystal's power seemed to grow, pulsing in his hand like a living thing. He could feel it vibrating with an energy that seemed to reach out, pulling him toward the creature, toward the nexus. As they made their way through the tunnels, the walls seemed to close in, as if the Earth itself was alive, watching them. The air grew thick and oppressive, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. It was clear that the creature was aware of their presence. It was watching, waiting. And with every step they took, the stakes grew higher. Time was running out. And the closer they got, the more dangerous the journey became. The creature was waiting. And soon they would face it, head on. The confrontation begins. The air was thick with anticipation as Adrian and the resistance soldiers descended deeper into the ancient network of tunnels beneath the Earth. With every step, the walls around them seemed to pulse, as if alive with the energy of the creature. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the oppressive atmosphere only grew heavier, as though the very planet was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Adrian clenched the crystal in his hand, feeling its power surging through his veins. It had been guiding him, whispering to him since he had first touched it. He could feel the monster's presence in every vibration, every pulse of energy. It was close now. They were getting closer to the heart of the creature's power, and every instinct screamed at Adrian to turn back, but he knew there was no turning back now. This is it, Captain Rourke said, his voice low, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon. His eyes scanned the dark tunnel ahead, his senses alert to any danger. We're almost there. Adrian nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The closer they got, the more he could feel the creature's consciousness pressing against his own. It was aware of them, aware of him. The creature was waiting, biding its time, preparing for something. But what? His thoughts were interrupted by a loud, sharp crack that echoed through the tunnel. The ground beneath them shook violently, and the walls seemed to move, as though the very earth was alive. The crystal in Adrian's hand vibrated harder, almost painfully, as if reacting to the disturbance. "It's here," Adrian whispered, his voice tight with fear. The creature had sensed their approach, and it was reacting. Without warning, a deafening roar erupted from the tunnel ahead, a sound so powerful it rattled their bones. The ground trembled as if something massive was moving toward them, shaking the very foundation of the earth. The monster was coming. "Get ready," Captain Rourke barked, his hand gripping his rifle tightly. "We need to move, now." The resistance group sprinted forward, their footsteps echoing in the tunnel as they raced toward the source of the roar. Adrian led the way, the crystal lighting the path ahead, glowing brighter with every step. It seemed to guide him, as if it knew exactly where they needed to go. But the deeper they went, the more the air grew thick with dread. Every instinct told Adrian that they were walking into the lion's den, that this would be their last stand. They had come this far, but would it be enough? As they rounded a corner, the tunnel opened up into a massive chamber. The walls of the chamber were covered in strange, glowing symbols, alien markings that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. The center of the room was dominated by a massive glowing portal, swirling with energy. It was the Nexus, the heart of the creature's power, and it pulsed with a malevolent energy that sent chills down Adrian's spine. And there, standing before the portal, was the creature. It was massive, larger than anything Adrian had imagined. It stood in the center of the chamber, its form a twisted mockery of what it had once been. Its body was covered in jagged alien armor, glowing with an eerie light that seemed to pulsate in rhythm with the portal. Its eyes burned with an unholy fire, and its massive mouth hung open, revealing rows of sharp, deadly teeth. The creature was an abomination. Half alien, half something else, something far more ancient and terrifying. For a moment, Adrian stood frozen, staring at the creature. It wasn't just a monster. It was something far worse, a thing of darkness and hunger that had existed for millennia. A remnant of an ancient time now awakened and hungry for destruction. The creature's head tilted toward them, its eyes locking onto Adrian. It let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air. Then, to Adrian's horror, it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, filling the chamber. "You should not have come here," it said, its voice echoing in Adrian's mind. "This is the end for you." The creature's words sent a wave of dread through Adrian's chest. It knew who he was. It knew what he had discovered. And worse, it knew what he was trying to do. Adrian's heart raced as he stepped forward, the crystal pulsing fiercely in his hand. The crystal responded to the creature's presence, its glow intensifying. It was as though the two forces, the crystal and the creature, were locked in a battle for dominance. The ground around them seemed to hum with energy, the air crackling, as if on the verge of exploding. "We don't have time for this," Captain Rourke said, his voice tense as he raised his rifle. "Take it down now." Adrian barely registered the soldier's words before the creature's massive hand shot out, slamming into the ground with enough force to send shockwaves through the chamber. The soldiers were thrown off their feet, their weapons skidding across the floor. The creature was toying with them, its power far greater than anything they had prepared for. Adrian didn't wait for the others to recover. With a surge of energy, he thrust the crystal forward, the light from it intensifying, blazing like a beacon. It was the only weapon they had, the only chance to stop the creature. "Now," Adrian shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The crystal was the key. It had to be. For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was silent, save for the hum of the crystal and the creature's low growl. Then, with a terrible, deafening roar, the creature lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air with deadly speed. Adrian didn't flinch. He held the crystal steady, focusing every ounce of his willpower into it. The energy within the crystal exploded, sending a wave of force crashing through the chamber. The monster recoiled, its roars turning into shrieks of pain as the crystal's light pierced through its armor, tearing through its very being. For a moment, the chamber was filled with blinding light, and the creature's form seemed to flicker, as though it were unraveling. The energy of the crystal was overpowering, forcing the monster back, but Adrian knew it wouldn't last long. He could feel it. The creature was adapting, fighting back against the power of the crystal. The battle between the two forces intensified, a clash of ancient power and human will. Adrian's hands shook as he struggled to maintain control over the crystal's energy. His vision blurred as the creature's dark influence pressed against his mind, trying to break his resolve. He could feel its malice, its hunger, its desire to destroy. It was everything Adrian had feared, and worse. The crystal flared again, and this time the creature's shriek was deafening. The ground beneath them cracked open, and the air was filled with the sound of the earth itself screaming in pain. Adrian could feel the creature's power waning, but he wasn't sure if it was enough. Was it truly the end, or was this just the beginning of something far darker? And then, as if in answer to Adrian's question, the creature's eyes glowed, brighter than ever, its massive form shifting and twisting. It was far from defeated. The battle was far from over. In that moment, Adrian realized the truth. This wasn't just about the creature. It was about something far larger. The crystal was more than a weapon. It was a connection to the universe itself. The creature's power was tied to something ancient and vast, something that transcended time and space. They had only just begun to uncover the true nature of the battle. The confrontation wasn't over. It was only the beginning, the final showdown. The chamber seemed to crack under the weight of the battle. The ground shook violently as the creature let out a spine-chilling roar, its monstrous form shuddering as if trying to tear itself free from the reality that contained it. The walls of the ancient tunnel trembled, sending debris cascading from above. A faint glow radiated from the nexus, as though it too was feeling the pull of the battle between Adrian and the creature. Adrian could feel it, the creature's wrath, its fury, and its deep-rooted hunger. The crystal he clutched in his hand was now pulsing violently, almost like it had a mind of its own. The creature's power was intense, filling the chamber with a dark energy that made the air thick and suffocating. He could see the gleam of its alien eyes burning with hatred and malice, watching him like a predator watches its prey. And as much as the crystal fought back, Adrian knew he was racing against time. This creature was far from beaten, and the more it struggled, the stronger it became. Adrian's mind raced as he tried to keep his focus. The creature had already adapted to the power of the crystal. What had once been a shining beacon of hope was now a mere flicker against the immense cosmic force it was up against. He could feel it. This was no ordinary alien. This was a force of nature, a primal entity that had existed before humanity's first breath. It had known only destruction and conquest, and it had lived for millennia, feeding off the chaos it created. Adrian's pulse quickened. He knew that if he didn't find a way to end it now, everything he loved, everything humanity had worked for, would be lost. Captain Rourke, along with the other soldiers, had gathered at the edge of the chamber, firing their weapons futilely into the creature's thick hide. Each shot seemed to bounce off the creature's armor as if the bullets were nothing more than raindrops on a metal surface. It didn't even flinch. The soldiers were out of their depth, fighting a monster they couldn't even begin to understand. The creature's claws slashed through the air like lightning, knocking one soldier off his feet and sending him crashing into a wall. Another soldier was sent sprawling by the sheer force of the creature's breath. Adrian's eyes locked with the monster's. He could feel its thoughts creeping into his mind, a sickening mix of contempt and amusement. It was playing with them. The creature was too strong, too intelligent. It understood what Adrian was trying to do, and it knew that time was running out for the humans. But it wasn't just a mindless beast. It was ancient. It had been born from a time where power was everything, and Adrian realized, with a sinking feeling in his chest, that the creature wasn't just a survivor. It was the survivor of an entire era, a force that had never been stopped, never been contained. It was beyond any earthly logic. A whisper rang in Adrian's ears as if the crystal itself were speaking to him. "You cannot destroy what is eternal." The voice echoed in his mind, familiar, almost comforting, but also undeniably threatening. Adrian flinched, trying to block out the mental assault. His hands gripped the crystal tighter, feeling its power coursing through him. But he didn't need to be told the truth. The battle wasn't about defeating the creature. It was about survival. There was no winning. The real question was whether they could survive long enough to sever the creature's link to Earth. Adrian's gaze flicked over to the Nexus, the pulsing core of the creature's power. It was its lifeblood, the heart of its existence. The crystal had brought them here, but it was also the only thing that could stop the creature. He had to destroy the Nexus. If he failed, it wouldn't matter how many soldiers or weapons they had. The creature would reclaim Earth as its own. Without thinking, Adrian began moving toward the center of the chamber. The creature seemed to notice him for the first time. It turned its massive head, its glowing eyes narrowing, and the chamber reverberated with its growl. With a sudden movement, the creature leaped toward him, its claws aimed directly at Adrian's chest. Time slowed as the massive appendages hurtled toward him. Adrian's heart raced, his breath caught in his throat. Then, in that split second, a blinding light erupted from the crystal. The creature shrieked in pain, its body recoiling as if it had been burned. The force of the crystal's energy sent shockwaves throughout the chamber, the air crackling with raw power. Adrian's vision blurred, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The Nexus was just ahead, the heart of the creature's power, and it was within his reach. The creature howled in fury, its massive form rising once more, its eyes now filled with unbridled rage. It seemed as if the beast would tear through the walls, destroy everything in its path to stop Adrian. But Adrian kept moving forward, his hands now crackling with the same energy from the crystal. He could feel it inside him, driving him forward. This was the final moment, the last stand for humanity. "You cannot defeat me," the creature's voice boomed in Adrian's mind. It was a cold alien sound like the voice of a god. The air around Adrian grew cold, and he could feel the creature's power pulling at his soul. "This world belongs to me. You cannot change that." Adrian's grip tightened on the crystal, as the walls around him seemed to pulse with the creature's words. But he didn't listen. He couldn't listen. His mind was focused solely on the Nexus. If he could get close enough, just close enough to break the creature's hold on Earth, they might have a chance. Then, with a cry of pure determination, Adrian lunged forward, holding the crystal high above his head. The creature reacted instantly, its massive form charging at him, its claws slashing through the air. But Adrian was faster. With one final surge of energy, he thrust the crystal forward, the force of its power ripping through the air. A brilliant beam of light shot out from it, striking the Nexus directly. The ground beneath them shook violently, and the creature's scream shook the very foundations of the chamber. The air crackled with energy, and for a moment it seemed as though time itself had stopped. The crystal's light blinded Adrian, and the world around him seemed to blur into a whirl of chaos. The creature let out a final, bone-chilling scream, its form twisting and contorting as if the light had torn through its very essence. The walls cracked and shattered, the ground buckling beneath the weight of the monster's final struggle. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the light faded. Everything was silent. Adrian slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the blinding light. The crystal had stopped glowing. The ground beneath him had stopped shaking. And in the center of the chamber, the creature was no more. Its massive form had crumbled to dust, its power gone. The Nexus, too, had vanished, leaving only a faint, lingering energy in the air. Adrian stumbled backward, exhaustion taking over his body. He had done it. The creature was gone. But at what cost? He turned to face the soldiers who had been watching in stunned silence. They had survived. Humanity had survived. But the battle had taken everything from them. The destruction, the sacrifice. It had all led to this moment. Adrian collapsed to his knees, the crystal still clutched tightly in his hand. It was over. But was it truly over? He didn't know. He couldn't be sure. The world was saved, but the scars of the battle remained. The true cost of their victory had yet to be realized, and Adrian knew in the depths of his heart that this fight was far from finished. The creature had been the beginning. The universe was vast, and there were forces beyond their comprehension that they would have to face. The true war for humanity's survival had just begun. Humanity's triumph, and the dark future ahead. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. The battle had ended, but the price of victory was etched into the very walls, the air thick with the aftermath of destruction. Adrian Quinn sat on the bar, cold, cracked stone floor, his chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. His hands trembled as he held the crystal, its light now dim, no longer the brilliant beacon of energy it had once been. The creature was gone, its massive form reduced to ash and dust. The nexus, the heart of its power, had been severed, but as Adrian sat there surrounded by the remains of the once unstoppable monster, a cold, gnawing feeling crept into his mind. The ground beneath him was cracked and fractured, remnants of the energy that had once surged through the chamber. The walls that had once held the creature's power were now just ruins, silent witnesses to the battle that had played out. The air was still heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for him to realize what had been lost. The victory they had fought so hard for felt hollow, as if it had come at too great a cost. Captain Rourke's voice broke the stillness. His tone was low, weary, but filled with a sense of disbelief. "We did it. It's over, isn't it?" Adrian slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting the soldiers. There was no victory in his gaze, no sense of triumph, only exhaustion and a lingering unease. I don't know." The soldiers around them were silent, their faces reflecting the same uncertainty. They had come through hell, facing down a creature from the deepest corners of space and time, and now, with the monster vanquished, they were left to pick up the pieces of a shattered world. The skies above had darkened, the air still thick with the remnants of the energy that had poured out during the battle. The nexus was gone, but the echoes of the destruction lingered. "What do you mean?" Rourke asked, his voice tinged with confusion. Adrian slowly stood, the weight of the crystal heavy in his hand. He looked around, taking in the ruins of the chamber, the shattered remains of the monster and the empty void where the creature's power had once been. "It's over for now, yes," he said, his voice distant. But the creature wasn't just a monster. It was a harbinger of something much larger, a force that has been waiting for millennia. This wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about holding back something far worse. The room fell silent again as his words sank in. The soldiers exchanged glances, unease spreading through them like wildfire. Adrian could feel it too, the heavy weight of what he had uncovered. The creature was no accident. It hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. It had been sent. The crystal, the power source, the very nature of the creature. It all pointed to one terrible truth. There were greater forces at play, and humanity had just become a part of a much darker, more dangerous game. Captain Rourke stepped forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "So you're saying this wasn't the end? That this was just a test?" Adrian's gaze flicked back to the sky outside the chamber, his mind racing. Not just a test. The creature, this monster, was part of something older than humanity. Its kind has been lurking for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. We were just the first target. There's something much bigger out there, something we've only begun to glimpse. A soldier, Sergeant Delaney, spoke up, her voice trembling. "What does that mean for us? For Earth? If this wasn't the final threat, then what's next?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. He had learned too much in the last few days. Too many secrets had been uncovered. And yet, for all his knowledge, the true scope of what lay ahead was still unclear. He had known that the monster in the sky was only the beginning. But now, as he looked around at the remnants of their victory, the weight of that realization seemed to bear down on him. "The creature wasn't the only one," he said finally, his voice low. It came from a place beyond our understanding, a force older than the Earth itself. And it's not just a single creature. It's part of a network of entities, each one more powerful than we can imagine. The creature was the first of many. And now, they know we're here. The silence in the chamber deepened. The soldiers, the few who remained standing, exchanged looks of horror. They had fought for so long to survive, only to realize that the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Adrian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he had just said. He had been preparing for the battle with the creature, but he hadn't fully understood what it represented. It was a warning, a call to action. The universe had taken notice of Earth, and now they would be forced to face the consequences. But there was something else Adrian hadn't shared. Something darker. The crystal had shown him more than just the creature's power. It had shown him a glimpse of the network that stretched across the stars. And what he had seen chilled him to the bone, a web of ancient beings, entities older than life itself, who had been pulling the strings for millennia. The creature was just the first harbinger of a greater war that was about to engulf Earth. "We're not just facing a single monster," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're facing an invasion, a cosmic war. And if we don't act now, Earth will be nothing but a pawn in a game that we don't even begin to understand." Captain Rourke's face hardened. "So what do we do now, Doc? What's the plan?" Adrian looked up at the sky, the darkness hanging over them. "We prepare. We rebuild. We start understanding the forces that are coming. We train, we study, and we fight. The creature was just a warning. But we still have time. We're not done, yet. But we will be, if we don't act quickly." His words echoed in the chamber, and for a long moment no one spoke. They had survived the impossible, but the war was far from over. Adrian could feel the weight of the future pressing down on them all. The battle for Earth was just beginning, and they were woefully unprepared. As the group gathered their equipment and began making their way back to the surface, Adrian kept his thoughts to himself. He had learned too much, seen too much. The Sao creature was only the first in a long line of cosmic horrors, and Earth was no longer safe. The survival of humanity depended not just on fighting the enemy in front of them, but on preparing for the enemies that were still out there, watching, waiting. The crystal in Adrian's hand pulsed faintly once again, as if reminding him that there was so much more to uncover. As they emerged into the daylight, the sky still darkened with the remnants of the battle. Adrian knew that this victory was fleeting. The real fight, the fight for the future of humanity, had only just begun.